Is the mic working? Thank you. Along with all the faces that we just saw on the video, we will also be joined by Dr. Pavan Singh in the panel, who has been working in NDMA since last 13 years and is the joint advisor of operations there. In our office, we have a Guru Shayad whose name is Janab Ambar Kharbanda, and me and Panchisa, most of you would be knowing him, often phrase this शेर that he says, और वही शेर मैं फिर आपसे इजाज़त चाहूँगी कि एक शेर पढ़ूँ। मुश्किलों को समझने का तरीका निकल आता, मुश्किलों को समझने का तरीका निकल आता, तुम बात तो करते कोई रास्ता निकल आता। So now I will invite our erudite panelists over on stage और उनकी बातों में हम अपने रास्ते ढूंढेंगे। To begin with, let me invite the moderator for the evening, Mr. Jain, who is the MD and Country Head India for Cushman Wakefield. Mr. Anshul Jain, please.
Thank you and good evening. Could I invite my fellow panelists to come on stage, please? Mr. Lohia, Mr. Saha, Mrs. Jayashree, Kurup, and Mr. Singh. Great. Thank you for joining this panel, and good evening, everyone. It was fairly, I was kind of sitting there quietly and listening to the previous speakers, and I thought it was fantastic. And what Mr. Thakur in particular spoke about the data and the fourth industrial revolution, I think he is absolutely spot on, and spot on to the fact that we in India will probably need to look at not only how to use that data more productively for us, as the data is, while data is available, the uses of that and just the general availability of that and reliability of that is still a pretty big challenge in this country at least. And then of course the reskilling part, which is about the 130 odd million jobs which will be created as a result of AI, machine learning and so on and so forth. And where do we actually, and how do we sort of make sure that our next generation, the youth, gets on to that bandwagon, but I'm sure they're smart enough to get onto that. Now coming to the topic for the day, so it's a pretty vast topic and I was kind of scratching my head as to how, how do we actually approach it. So I was listening very intently to the videos as to what the panelists were speaking on. I think the way sort of I want to sort of approach it is, we want to talk about the business infrastructure, which is really the offices, the warehouses, the retail malls. So that's the hard infrastructure, because that's life which I come from. And of course there's technology and data, the security of that infrastructure, the security of data, and we can talk a little bit about that, and as I kind of go around and pick minds of people. There is this entire angle of transportation, so that it's roads, railways, airports, and how does it contribute to the economy or hinders what is the hindrance in the economy, because of course there's a massive productivity loss as well in terms of just the sheer amount of time it takes now to traverse the city. We are, part of our business is in office broking business, and of course our advisors are out in the market, and back in 2008-9 when I'd come back to India, it took us about an hour from Gurgaon to Noida, and that I thought was a lot, and 10 years later, it takes 2 hours, right? And this is despite the road networks emerging, and the kind of productivity loss that we have on our people on that is just massive. Now we're thinking of ways how to counter that through technology and have sort of, let's say, first round of inspections, second round of inspections, using AR, VR in virtual environment. So we've got to do that, otherwise, and use the data to do that, otherwise we are dead in water in a few years' time, because that physical infrastructure, however much it improves, unfortunately, I mean, there's demographic dividends that we are enjoying at this point in time, but it also has its downside, because that's not going to go away, and this problem is going to only get worse. When we talk about infra, water, sanitation, public health, I spoke about that, and that in part on our panel. Mr. Saha, who is working in this area, it is just the site of the garbage mountain which has come up on the Delhi-Faridabad road, the Gazipur, we kind of all spoken about the impact that it has on the health, the general pollution, air pollution, and therefore the impact that it has on health. And again, I kind of relate that back to the productivity loss that the businesses have as a result, and what kind of, and to deal with that from our sort of office infrastructure perspective, how do people in this room, which is the facility managers, tackle that problem, so that at least when people are in office, they get clean air and clean environment, right? It's a big element. But the third aspect of infra, I suppose, is the housing infra, where obviously this government scheme and this government's pushed very hard on housing for all, and perhaps we can, go to Jayashree on that a bit later, just talk about that infra and how is that developing and how does that relate to our work environment, because there's, on one hand we're trying to create a live, work, play. What we're also finding is, from a work perspective, the companies are still very focused on the 7 big cities, and within those 7 big cities, focused office markets, right? So the live, work, play can't happen for 300, 400 million people, right? So you've got to have dispersed population who need to be transferred. So what's really happening in that area? Then, of course, the water I've already spoken about. So I'll just kick off with talking about the office sector and how the office sector has developed, and then I'll go to the panelists. So, back in 2005, 6 is then the first, let's say early 2000s is when the economy really started kind of booming, and the FDI in real estate got opened up in 2005, and we saw some of the first generation office buildings kind of coming up, and all of you have sort of hands-on experience, or most of you rather, of managing those buildings. And the buildings are pretty simple back then, and the requirements were pretty simple of the tenants. And as the sort of the demand matured, so at that point in time, if you remember, the first wave of businesses, services businesses, really call centers and low-end processes, which over a period of time obviously matured. And what we've seen in the last sort of 3 or 4 years is a lot of work. So while call centers and the traditional BPO businesses are probably slowing down a bit, but what's really taken off is work around artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud, data security, creating areas like working in areas like fintech, health tech, and so on and so forth. Startups have created their own kind of thing, the e-commerce, and so on and so forth. Now, what's happening is these are all much more value-added work that's happening in country. Because it's more value-added, their affordability is a lot more. And the skills are higher skill sets, and therefore the demand for a better quality office environment is there. So that's on the demand side. Of course, the supply side has responded. Back in, and we've kind of borrowed a lot from what's happening globally. So back in, again, 2005 to 10, the first generation office buildings, which were pretty straightforward, simple, and nothing flash about it, because the affordability was also in that range. But as the demand changed, global institutions came in. Till about 2010, there's hardly any global institution apart from perhaps Ascendus owning any real estate, office real estate in India. But since 2010 to now, the base of global and Indian institutional ownership has really quickened, and today almost 40 to 45% of office real estate is actually owned by institutions, and And what's that's driven is it's really driven the quality in the office space, quality in the way offices are managed today, which really marries in to the demand, which is obviously more sort of higher end demand, I should say. That's impacted all of you. I think the facility management industry has changed significantly, where it was down to very simple housekeeping, security, perhaps just keeping the limited M&E in the building going, to today where those have become basic services that you've got to offer, and obviously you've got to keep the building going. The buildings are a lot more complicated. The elevator systems and the air conditioning systems, the electricity systems, power systems are a lot more complicated. So there's one big element on that. But the other major change that's happened is on the hospitality side of it, which is today most of you, whether you're working in managing inside of office or in a building, are interacting with your customers or your colleagues who are your customers. And we heard the first speaker on the day today talking about how the interaction with customers or interactions with the people that they are serving becomes so important to know the pulse of the organization, the pulse of the quality of the management, and therefore try and improve that. So I think one of the things that we say quite often is that we are managing a building. Every person who's walking through that building is a customer. Every person. And once we have that mindset, then suddenly the infrastructure, the way you manage that particular infrastructure completely changes, because you're basically trying to give an experience to you. So, if we keep talking about offices, I'll probably never shut up, because that's an area of my sort of expertise. But I'll just go to Mr. Saha first, just cognitively kind of started with, you doing a lot of work on obviously on the plastic recycling. You worked for Coca-Cola India before, but possibly in the sustainability areas of water was obviously a big issue that Coke had to kind of deal with and make sure that it's using the resources sustainably. And perhaps some of these organizations started thinking about that before we started in the general market talking about that. So it will be great to get some of that perspective to see, how has the thoughts around sustainability changed over the last 5 or 10 years, and how does it really impact our day-to-day lives, and particularly our working infrastructure, even living, our sort of office or residential infrastructure.
Thank you. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. So first of all, thank you for having me here. This is the first time I'm in the presence of such a august gathering. Thanks to Casey from Gillette and his work in the facility management space. I would not have had come here if it was not him. So thanks, Casey, for having me here. Before I get to the book example, let me say my own example of how I grew up and when I started off my first job with Aisha, and we had to kind of come to a factory, clean our own desk. It was almost like a Japanese company to that extent. DQM at that point was there, and then at some point in time, somebody would come with a cup and give a tea, half a cup of tea, sometime during the day, twice a day. And that was it. I mean, there was no AC in the factory environment like this. To the talk 30 years later, where probably you go get the tea, but there are so many other things which have come in the facility management space, which bothers or which is important for a facility manager. And I encounter it sometimes as a customer, sometimes as a consumer, sometimes as a person who's helping sustainability in those facility management companies, or as part of the sustainability team to that building or the factory or to the premise. Things like access, how to make sure that you get the right set of people coming in and still make sure that you're humble and taking care of security as much. But to your point, make sure that you are super efficient, although it doesn't, the space gives a feeling of wholesomeness, yet you are super efficient to utilize the space. And at the same time, make sure that the cost structure of each of per square feet is at the most competitive rate. So it's like, you know, qualities are going up, costs are coming down, and so therefore I realized in most of my tenure as I graduated from simple chair and stool table kind of a situation to now a very rush office. The cost continues to be under pressure. So therefore, sustainability to office spaces and to our factories, first thing became as cost, and if you do cost saving, then obviously you are even better for a company and for also for facility management space. I'm sure it is like that. But for me, I have seen it from an outsider point of view largely, but I can still understand the challenges in this space. The work that I'm doing now, of course I worked with Coca-Cola for 20 years and water was a challenge. But for Coca-Cola now, the next big challenge is plastic. Because you know, as much as the population of this country, that much is the number of bottles they produce in a year. So you can imagine that's a lot of plastic bottles. There are a lot of plastics here, and I have jumped into sustainability and entrepreneurship as a social marketing cause, but and there are huge challenges to go and figure out what to do with the Bangwari or Ghazipur. But there is the feeling that I have come with is that there is value in it and how to extract that value. So, for example, I am very proud that I am very happy that this hotel has decided to continue to keep this bottle, because under pressure of various influencers, people have started serving you in hotel bottled water, but not in bottle, but in probably in glass and in jar, which you might not be, you might not trust them as much, and it also may be a difficult thing to keep washing and expending extra amount of water to just bring you a jar and a glass which is washed and you are satisfied that okay, I can have water from here even if it's a 5-star hotel. But you know what? This plastic is what I convert to a t-shirt and I can supply to you. So, and it's not an invention. It is not my invention. I can supply, and there are multiple people who can do that. So, if you are able to build recycling loops and you are able to do circular economy, every value, every waste has a value. It's just misplaced resource. And so, therefore, plastic is the same. 5 billion tons of it is getting wasted. Today, it's an eyesore because it's littered. If it's brought back, it can convert into oil, it can convert into t-shirt, it can convert into products which does not require virgin plastics anymore. So I would say that is sustainability. In Coca-Cola, we understood sustainability on water much before the world was going through the water crisis, and people still say that probably if there will be a third world war, it will be on water. We put every drop of water back into the ground and made India and the rest of the world 125% water positive. So when we took 100 liters out, we put 125 liters in, and that's what we did by rain harvesting, not only at our facilities, but we took huge amount of dams and stuff like that to put the water inside. So I think sustainability is a part of any operation, and I'm sure it is for a facility manager as well. Number one reason for that is cost. It is able to reduce cost for you. If suppose you are able to extract your guests' waste, because that's a huge amount of value in it, the paper, the plastic and the other things, and you are able to extract that and sell it to a company who is able to give you, let's say, 1% extra revenue. That extra revenue is coming to you free. So that's how I see sustainability. It has a cost element to it, and you're able to crack that code. You make a business case, and that's what Rohit is all.
So it's an interesting point you make, because obviously the government is talking about banning single-use plastic. And are you arguing otherwise, or because I just think and enlighten me on that, because the amount of plastic we're using, even if we ban single-use plastic, I think there'll be enough left to recycle.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm a startup right now. So I don't have a brand ambassador, a paid brand ambassador, but I have an unpaid brand ambassador in Mr. Modi. So nothing better than that, right? So at this point in time, when I entered about a year ago, now you see everybody talks every time about plastics, and everywhere you go. I'm coming from another place where the whole day's discussion was around plastics and how to take care of it and how to recycle. Coming to single-use plastics, I have probably helped create a definition and talk to the committee. It's still grey. Even this is single-use,
yes,
and every PET bottle is. But if I am able to recover, where this one gets recovered about 90% plus, that's what the newspaper full-page editorial said. Then you're taking care of it, right? So single-use plastic is to the extent what is used once and thrown away. But I think the definition should go further. That what is not extracted back from the environment and then therefore litter. And much of the reason would be that if there is no attractive proposition for the waste picker to pick it up, because they are the real facility managers for the rest of the country. 30 lakh of them. They are the real facility managers who are outside this building, but still waiting for when this conference gets over, so that they get the handle on this bottle and then go make the money. So so if they don't get a good value for what we throw, and that could be a small shampoo pouch, which has no value, it's a multi-layered plastic, it cannot be recycled, then I would consider that to be a serious problem. So there is a problem. I'm absolutely not saying that there is not, but I would also say that there are some.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Kurup. We've got all the sort of shiny boxes, nice offices, but as I said, they're all sort of concentrated, and as I speak to a lot of our clients, they're not willing to even, a lot of our clients are not willing to migrate beyond the top 6 or 7 countries, because that's where the talent is, and that's where the talent wants to sort of work. And yet, the time to travel from their homes have only been increasing, and affordable housing cannot be made in the city centers just because of the cost of the land, right? So the time to travel only increase and increase. So what are you seeing any trends as part of your work at MBtv on the sort of residential real estate, and what's your view on the general housing infrastructure and as it relates to the work infrastructure?
Let's go back a few years. In 2006, 6-7, when the property markets had peaked, everybody aspired to buy a house, and they could not afford it. It was way too expensive. But the consumer, the end-use consumer, did not have the housing that he wanted. The demand at the base of the pyramid was always there, but there was just no supply. Till about 4 years ago, there was just no supply. Why was that? Because the marketing cost of one premium housing and the marketing cost of one affordable house is exactly the same. It makes more economic sense to all the developers to create a premium house and sell it and make more money, because marketing-wise you were spending the same. However, when there was a push and there was an incentive, the base of the pyramid suddenly got serviced. And I would like to actually tell you that on the website, on Magicbricks, one thing that we noticed is that earlier, if a consumer came, he came and looked for property that was 50 lakh and above, 1 crore and above, and things like that. Today, the confidence with which the consumer comes to the site and looks for a house for 15 lakh, 20 lakh, in places where he would never even imagine that he would come and search, which means that the demand was always there, the supply was never there. When the supply came, the demand started picking. So across cities, whether it's big cities or small cities, what's selling in the market today is the 30 to 60 lakh, maybe 80 lakh. Beyond that, the markets have shrunk. The markets are quiet. And why is that? Because one of the things that you mentioned, a lot of the affordable housing that came in the periphery. It was in the boondocks. You couldn't reach it. You did not have, it did not have infrastructure. You look at the Dwarka Expressway, 10, 12 years later, we still don't have the expressway. And the consumer at some point who had come confidently saying that here's something I can afford to buy was not serviced. And what does the consumer do? He says that in which case, if I'm not getting the house anyway, I'd rather spend rental money and live where I can comfortably live. Near the workplace, don't have to commute so much, all the facilities are there. I can't afford to buy it, but so what? Why can't I take it on rent and stay? So you see, there's been a quantum shift in the mindset of the consumer, and today, after a series of, from 5 to 12-year delays in housing, today the consumer says that there is safety in numbers. The consumers have got together, they are challenging the system, and they want exactly, if I've lived here my entire day in a well-managed office, why wouldn't I want the same in my house? Which means that I will look for community living. I would look for housing which is service, which means that I have my water backup, my power backup and so on. So actually it's a complex thing, and I think commercial, like I said earlier, commercial is at the heart of it. If there is a commercial space, a commercial hub, when we survey our consumers, what they say is that I don't want to actually be exactly around it because I may not be able to afford it, but it certainly has to be accessible enough. The social infrastructure, schools, hospitals, hotels, entertainment centers, all this matter, which means the quality of life. If I'm used to a good quality of life in premium A-grade commercial spaces, I would like to replicate that in my own housing unit, but it doesn't matter what my budget is. Whatever my budget, the benchmark is high, and I want those facilities in my housing as well. And these are the subtle nuances that you're seeing. When we go to the RERA courts and we...
So facility management in the housing sector is quite big now.
Absolutely.
Professional facility management, yeah.
And all of you guys are there, whichever new complex I go to, it's either one of the ITCs managing it. Why? Because the consumer takes that as the new benchmark. I want to be serviced. And that change in the housing market is something that's significant. It's not only in the big cities, it's also the smaller places, in Indore, in Bhopal, in Jaipur, Lucknow, wherever you go. If there is a housing complex, you want it to be well managed. You don't want the hassles of every day getting a plumber, getting an electrician and things like that. And this is a quality shift that we've seen in the housing.
Thanks. So Lohia, you spoke about data security. Because you obviously deal with a lot of sensitive data because it's all about people and recruitments and how people move around and so on and so forth. It'll be interesting to get your perspective because obviously, from the sort of I'd say technology infrastructure perspective, the security of data that Mr. Thakur was talking about becomes extremely important if you lose that, it's losing a competitive edge, isn't it? So could you sort of enlighten us on how you guys look at data security and how companies and businesses can protect it?
Mr. Thakur was talking about, he was using some app which is all the information is secure, taken by Google and other, and they are trying to sell the product with the help of information which they are not intended to make, but they have taken without their consent. So Google has paid at least more than $2 billion fine in Europe for the GDPR, just because they are using using the data which they have not taken the user's consent to use in the way they want to use. So there are a lot of litigation going in the Europe on Google and Facebook for use the data. I think India is also coming on with a law how to use the data. So people don't want to be tracked what they're doing and marketing companies selling the product without their consent. So India has also almost formalized the law which is similar to the GDPR law. So GDPR law talks about the General Data Protection Act. So you need to take the user consent for using the data. If you are collecting the data for the payroll, for your customer, for a specific purpose, you can use only the data for that purpose. This law is coming in, will be coming in India in next few years, 2-3 years. So we have to ready for that, how we use the data. And the security of data is also important because if our computer get the data, so they know all our what we are doing and they know all our sources. So we will lose the edge to get the customer. So yeah, we do have a lot of security, like personal device is not allowed in the office. Like it creates a lot of problem because your personal phone is not allowed. That is because you have a camera there, you have a data storage. So you can take even the USB port is banned in the computer, still you take the data, you can copy. You heard a lot of news that some data has been stolen and they try to call them with the social security number in the US and try to say your tax is due, you pay, otherwise we are going to arrest them. That's a lot of news in coming days. So this data can be used in a lot of ways. So obviously this creates a lot of dissatisfaction because as host was saying that think without the mobile, but in our company the employees cannot take the mobile in the office because of security reasons. And all the KPO, BPO industries that is not allowed. So it creates some dissatisfaction among the employee, but because of the security, we have to do that. And a lot of spamwares and attacking, so it needs to be done, like all the security measures need to be taken. Like proper security policies and getting the external audit done by the security agencies, which have the expertise implementing ISO. Just not taking the ISO 27001 certificate, but implementing it. That's what more important is. And GDPR is not only applicable on Europe, it's applicable on the European citizen. If any company has the European citizen working them on that, it will be applicable. You cannot use their data without their consent, otherwise there is a huge penalty. So those security measures, obviously getting audited by the external auditors, making sure the policy and the periodical employee training is done, so employees are aware what they can do, what they can share, what they can't share. That's very much important.
So we make quite a big deal about sort of global multinationals when we spoke about Facebook and them listening into conversations or figuring out conversations, data breach, etc., etc. And I think in India, the data breach is rampant, right? I mean, for the longest I did not used to give my mobile telephone number out to the security, on the security register, because the moment you give out, you get mysteriously you get onto databases and you start receiving unwanted texts and unwanted phone calls. I've tried, I don't know, DND never seems to work. And now, of course, technology's become a clever way, in my mind, to take my data away, because in a lot of the buildings I go, they say you got to sign in with your telephone number because an OTP needs to come to your number, right? And I'm just thinking it is completely useless, meaningless, because all that's happening is they're taking my number and then using that data for something. Where does this end? I mean, it's all in the name of security, etc. But at the end of the day, the data is being misused, right?
India is coming with a law that the consent need to be taken similar to GDPR, what the data can be used. So it is going to come, it is in draft stage right now, so the law will be here in a couple of years. But similar to DND, it's the leadership, how much they want to push the law. That's what important. Enforcement of law is equally important. Like DND, you get a lot of unwanted messages and law. So the law will be there. Let's see how leader push it.
So there's no political will, is what you're saying.
Yeah, political will is important.
Right. Okay. Good. Coming to Mr. Singh, in our business, which is this, I've been in this industry for a long time, and our service provider business typically, and I'm sure a lot of other businesses are like that, the last month of the year is the most important month. Last month of the financial year is the most important month from a revenue and EBITDA perspective, right? And all of us, I think, particularly in our industry, book significant amount of revenues and EBITDA in the last month or last quarter, because things start and then everybody knows that the targets to be met and you're kind of under pressure to close it. And one of the nightmare situations that I always have in my mind say what happens if there is a disaster, in a natural disaster or another man-made disaster, let's say in December or November, because that will kind of throw my entire year's work out of whack. So, it's a significant risk to the businesses, any kind of disaster. And as kind of lived around the world, and while there's scale of disaster and there's another scale of disaster, right? So there's disasters which can't be managed despite best preparation, disasters that can be managed. I think the perception that at least I have, probably a lot of people have in India, is our preparedness is pretty low. And you work for the National Disaster Management. It'd be great to hear your perspective as to how you look at the disaster recoveries and how prepared is NDMA to support businesses and getting businesses back up and running and getting people's life back up and running should a disaster happen.
Thank you, Mr. Anshul, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to highlight two facts that there was a recent report from UN for the period of 20 years from 1998 to 2017. So it enumerated that India alone has lost around $79.5 billion in these 20 years.
How much, sorry?
79.5.
Or $80 billion.
$80 billion. Yeah. And then the list was topped by US, followed by China, Japan, and basically the global economy lost around 2.9 trillion in these 20 years. So over a period of 30, 40 years, or the past 3-4 decades, there has been a substantial decrease in the life lost, or people have not been affected more. We initially had a knee-jerk reaction. We used to see disasters once it has come, then we used to respond to them. From that era, we have moved to a more participatory approach, more planned approach. But yes, the economic loss every year is one thing. I should say, if not incremental, it can be exponential terms also, in geometric progression also in certain terms. So we need to focus more on these economic losses. We need to arrest them. So for this, I would like to refer to one of reports which is done by FICCI, which is called India Risk Survey. It is done every year probably. In 2018 report, they have come out with 12 risks which affect business communities. And like it was said by Mr. Thakur and also pointed out by him, and you also told about data security, cyber security is the biggest threat to business community, followed by the natural disasters, followed by fire, and then political instability, and there are many other issues, lockout, strikes. So they have been classified into 4 broad areas. The first area talks about the hazard and the event risk. The second talks about the operational and the physical risk. The third talks about the market and economic risk. And the fourth talks about the information risk.
And number one. And number two, will the advent of such offices in smaller towns, will that promote businesses getting more dispersed from the top 6-7 cities? Is that something you think is going to happen?
See, I think a lot of the business happens in the top 7-8 cities, but no longer do we hold on to those cities. The penetration into more cities is happening because there is rapid urbanization, less utilization of services and so on. So largely in the BFSI sector, any services company, the telecom and so on, that's where we notice a lot of penetration into the smaller cities. And I'll take the example of Magicbricks. We are today in 45 cities. Now, our big business is in the top 8 cities. But that doesn't mean that we must not have representation in the smaller cities. But we want the same quality of office, services and things like that we have in the larger cities. Why would we want to start a business afresh? We would rather work in the co-working spaces, and there are many reasons for this. One, less economies of scale. If we ran it ourselves, it would be far more expensive. So it's much better to take 20 seats, 15 seats in smaller cities and get serviced well. and that actually improves the productivity of the workforce. Now, when that happens, the smaller cities, the quality of life for our own staff is better because they can afford much better within the salaries that they have. It's cheaper to live there. So it's a complex kind of thing, but I think at every point, the numbers drive it. Will we go into a city? Yes. Why would we go to a city? Because that is where the business is happening. Which are the businesses? If it's the FSI, telecom, the services, then we know that that is where our residential business is growing. And if the residential business is growing, we would like to be there without actually owning that space. We would,
especially Odisha, what happened. Thanks to my native place, what NDMA did for Kolhapur and Singh. So what do you expect? Because at government level, after disaster management as Act, I think we have done phenomenal job, still collector level. But do you expect any specific things from industry, from corporates in that particular area? Because what I am personally observing is that I think if we as citizens, anyone as corporate, we just watch the fun, what's happening. And on ground, only your people, whether it's NDMA or India, they are working very hard. Like you rightly pointed out, only response. But from proactive preparation or mitigation perspective, do you expect anything from corporates sitting here?
Starting, if we talk about Bhuj earthquake in 2001, they came out for resettlement plan, the government of Gujarat did it themselves. And that was a wonderful resettlement, even accredited today also. And that was done by MCA, good step, because earlier it was only for environment sustainability, then it was for education and other issues. Now DRR is also one of the issues in that list. The second thing which I wanted to highlight is, like we are talking about infrastructure. So what we did, like if you talk about SDGs, we talk about SFDRR, there is one more framework for disaster which is called Sendai framework, or you talk about the COP21, the Paris Agreement. All the three major developmental frameworks talk about coherence. They want to link disasters with the climate and with sustainable development. Like he said, for him, sustainability is how to use the plastic better. Correct? So what for sustainability in SDG Goal 1, it talks about for reduction of poverty, Goal 11, sustainable cities, or Goal 9, eradication of all the city issues. So what I want to focus is, the internationally it is there, nationally also it is there in the plans, in the policies. So out of that we came out in 2018 with Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, which was done here only in Delhi. In the interest of this August gathering, I would like to say that the government of India is supporting this coalition for over 3 years. So please come forward, give your ideas, regulate the methodology, the standards, and then participate in this PRA program.
Thanks. So with battery over time, but I must ask the same question to Mr. Saha. What can corporates do more?
The idea was that every company creates a ripple effect and has a little bit of footprint when it operates. There is no company, even if you think that it's an internet company, they still will have carbon footprint, a physical footprint, a safety footprint, a disaster footprint. So there is a footprint that every company does have. Now, the realization has started coming in the corporates now with global leaders saying that, look, we have now started understanding the footprint, what we are causing. For example, 10% of the products of Unilever will be off the shelf because the CEO has decided that there is enough plastics that they are already leaving behind. So that is the only solution. So if I could have that for 1 minute, please.
Thank you. It's very heartening to see that on the agenda. Of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen the awareness going up significantly, and all I sort of recommend very strongly and hope that as we go back and all of us here control significant amount of real estate, as we go back, even a small change in behavior, small change in how we manage garbage disposal, manage plastics, manage the transportation footprint that all of us have.